the Alison Arngrim Show, and I'm Alison Arngrim, although some of you may know me better as Evil Nellie Olson. Luckily tonight, I am Alison Arngrim, and this is the Alison Arngrim Show. And here on the Alison Arngrim Show, we talk about the things that make us feel good, the movies and the television shows that made us feel good, and the people who made them. And people are doing things now to make the world a better and more interesting place. And oh, it's one of those tonight. Yes, yes, it is. So I put up on my Facebook earlier, I'm talking to a spy tonight. Like, wow, tune in to see how that goes. But no, he's a very nice guy. I've actually met him before. He's a very nice guy. But this man is a trip. Okay, it's just it will all blow your mind. So it's like pull up a chair. So this is Pete Turner, and I said, he spent many years as counterintelligence spy, literally, for the U.S. Army, going to all the different countries, all the war-torn places, and he now has a whole nonprofit. He's got a whole organization, a think tank, Ground Truth Central, and it's all about actually providing information outside the typical media landscape, actually looking at geopolitics, tactical espionage, really like heavy stuff here. And it was like they weren't doing it at work, so he decided to start his own organization to do this correctly. My favorite quote I've seen so far is, as he puts it, "I was tired of seeing people getting killed while we floundered from top to bottom." What? Yes, he has been in the field and seen the mistakes that get made. We go in to help people, America and other countries. We go in to help people. And we go into wars, and we're trying to save lives. But situations happen where they don't think it through. They don't have all the information, and terrible things go wrong. As we know, as we watch the news, we go, "Oh, that didn't go well. What went wrong?" He is the person who is analyzing all of that and going, "Here's what you did wrong, and here's how we fix it." Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Turner.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so good.
The crowd of thousands
so
that apparently is in my living room.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on the show, Alison. It's great. It's great to see you face to face, and now again on the on your show. It's wonderful. I think you do great work, and I love the opportunity to talk with you.
Excellent. So it's just sort of now mind-blowing to say, we're talking to a spy. Is what you did in your career, is it really technically, were you a spy? And how does one get into that line of work and go, I think I'll go be a spy? How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, my job was to help, go out into the field and help the commander win more and lose less, and find out the things that no one else could find out, and look for the enemy and make it so that they lost more and won less. I mean, that's the definition of a spy. Try to find out the things that we didn't know, the unknowns, and all of those things. And so, how does one get into that? Well, I just you just sign up. If you test well, I did, and the job was called counterintelligence agent. And I don't know, there's a lot of ways to do that job. It's one of those jobs where you can be a lie detector test person. You can debrief people who defect. It's all kinds of different jobs. My particular thing that I got into was just going out in war-torn places and talking with people, building networks and finding sources and running those sources and getting information. That's what I specialized in. I didn't know that going in. It just sort of how my character is, and so I built networks of people and became friends with people and built trust. Even if my job is to find the evilest people I can find and turn them into my friends. Now imagine about people that I like, and so all of a sudden I've got friends everywhere, and they tell me things.
There you go. So when someone says someone's a spy, what would you think for the average person the biggest misconception is? They hear someone's a spy, and what do they usually think that is?
The job is different in a lot of ways. There's a lot of kinds of spies. And I think, the thing you see on TV is that person is probably doing 16 people's jobs. My job is there's a lot of report writing. But I got to go out on a combat patrol too to go see things and ask questions.
Wait, the job is the paperwork, everything like every other job? Are you telling me even when you're a spy, the job is the paperwork?
Yeah, because if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So you have to write down what you did. You have to do accounting.
Every council, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen.
Yeah,
it's the social work. Yeah. It's like a social worker for the military.
Yeah, I will say this though: there is some of the stuff in movies is true. I mean, you have to have a certain ruggedness. In my case, in my very specific case, you have to have a certain ruggedness. You have to be able to drink. You have to be able to have some charm. I mean, I can't get into gunfights because I'll always be outnumbered, right? And so you have to be able to be, I call it, I have to be Johnny Good Time, right? Everybody's got to like me because if they don't, problems add up real fast to where I can't get out of there.
You could be dead if you're not. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're in places where you could be dead
yeah,
really quickly. So yeah,
yeah.
so you have to ingratiate yourself. It would be, you have to talk your way out of situations.
Yes,
You
yeah,
sort of
for sure. And I've been
slip.
in some situations for sure. Yeah,
Yikes! So one of the things it's fascinating because what you talk about is over and over again, not just the military aspects of going into a country and saying, okay, we need to, this is the enemy and we need to win this war, but situations where they're trying to do a humanitarian effort and things go just absolutely upside down awry. And you're
yeah.
saying that you can go in and gather information and go, well, if you'd asked these people, would have that many of these humanitarian efforts go completely sideways because they haven't actually gathered the correct information. That's why we're seeing all these disasters on the news.
Yeah, there's so many examples of this. I'm trying to think of something specific, but there's so many times where we look a lot of times people will say, "Oh, you're going to go to this country, country X, whatever it is," but that's totally different than country Y. And I'm like, yeah, but we're the same, and we run the same playbook. And so one of the things that we'll do is we'll export our belief into another place. And so we'll say that women have to be empowered there, and I'm published in this like academically. And so we'll tell everybody else how women should live, but we don't earn the right to do that. We don't know how to go into a village and engage the women. We don't talk to the elders who keep the women safe day to day. We just come in and start saying, "Hey, when we do things like we invent the women's period, and we're like, this is how you wear a sanitary napkin." We don't even know what they do for that process, and so
You
we
don't
act
even
as if they
start
have
with
no.
what they're existing doing because obviously it's, well, yes, you don't want women to be locked literally in their house and unable to go to a doctor and all these horrible stories we hear. And it would be great to have sanitary pads and tampons. Generally, those are really handy things to have, I can tell you. So these are all good, but it's like, right. So the obvious question would be, what is it you do now when you're
Right.
menstruating would be like an
We
obvious thing
skip
you would
all
need to
that,
know.
right? Yeah,
Oh
or we
yeah,
bring it up
that
in front of
that's
the
gonna
men.
go bad. Oh, well, is that like when NASA? What is it? They sent they when they had the woman, the astronaut, and they gave her like 1,000 tampons, and it was like a 2-day trip. Because like I had no idea how anything.
Yeah,
So it's the
we
same
brought all
people
these
are going
tampons
in.
for your women, and the dudes are like, "What is going on?" It's like, and so here's the thing: is when you leave that village and nobody goes back, you just assume that you've invented the period and you've shown these women how to deal with it. Well, Pete goes back to that village, and I'm like, "Hey, what happened last week here in this village?" And they're like, "These crazy Americans came and they told us we had to give these women these bandages." And I'm like, "Well, what happened?" "Oh, we beat all our women." And you're like, you beat all your women. And so these kind of things happen, right? So you assume that you've done this good thing and that this women are now empowered in some way, but in reality, you don't know that. And so when you go back and check, you get this bad outcome. Nobody even believes it. They're like, no, the women were saved from this. Like, no, that's not what I found out. And so these are the outcomes that happen all the
I
time,
mean, it's
whether
not
it's
just about this
farming or
clean
anything.
water. All over the world, people are having trouble getting access to clean water. Everyone says, well, that would be like a major first thing for all of these people in all these countries. Oh my God, access to clean water, the things that would happen for people if they simply had access to clean drinking and bathing and cooking water. And you said
Right.
that gets complicated.
Oh my gosh, water is one of the most complicated things ever. I mean, in the Arab world, if they're working under Sharia law, there's a person in every village responsible for water. Now, look, maybe in that village not, but you should work under the assumption if you understand, the Quran and Sharia law, which even if you don't have a working knowledge of that, you should just come with a village like, I don't know, how do you guys deal with water here, right? Even if you don't know Quranic law, and then they'll say, oh
Who
yeah,
gets your
Dave,
water? Yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah, Dave handles water. Oh, where's Dave? Oh, Dave doesn't work here today. And you're like, oh, okay, great. And so you start with an like, no one, I don't know anything. And then so you start to learn. But when you come in with a solution that they need clean water, you assume that they don't have water. And if they're living there, so they're doing something to survive. And all of a sudden you find out that they do have a mechanism for clean water. It may not be clean, but for our standards, but they don't live with our standards. Maybe they live in the Stone Age and this is how they get by and this is how they do these things. But we often skip those steps and we just, there's a saying that I have. you cannot presume to change or improve the condition of something you refuse to understand the condition of. Like you can't. And so we don't start with understanding what's there, the condition of it. And that's the biggest problem. So we have this policy that starts way on high. I call it the spaceship. And they look down and they go, oh, the problem is one. And so you go down and you're like, that's not the problem here. The problem here is safety. Everybody here is terrified because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So you think one is the problem. The problem here is pumpkin. And they're like, what do you mean pumpkin? That doesn't make that. No, no, the problem here is pumpkin. And then to solve pumpkin, you have to chicken foot. And they're like, chicken foot? That didn't make any sense. And so you're literally saying these things that don't go together. And I have to try to sort out how chicken foot equals turkey pot pie, which equals one. And nobody understands that. And I don't understand it. So I have to slow down and go, explain chicken foot to me. And they're like, it's not chicken foot, you dummy. It's, corduroy pants and I'm trying to think of things don't go together, right? Corduroy pants and gear shift knob. And I'm like, oh, I thought you said chicken foot. And they're like, nope, you put your American brain on there and it's actually these, oh, okay. And so you slowly piece it together.
Crazy. But you're talking about also systems that we may say, okay, well, that is their system, but it's not really a very good system. Like many of the systems are systems where people could be having water, could be having safety, could be having food, and the people who run the place are going, no, we've decided to not give you food, safety, and water because we don't like you, and we're going to be dictators about it and be awful and not let you have water and food. And it's not a good system. It's a terrible system. And of course, it doesn't make sense to us, but you still have to know what that is to do anything about it.
Yeah. Now you have to understand that there are systems that connect the systems. And so there's this great story from this ethnographer named Benedicte Grima, who taught me a lot. I only met her a couple of years ago, but I read her books. So there's this Afghan village. So village B has these two young men. They go into town. So they travel through village A and they go into town and they rob a liquor store, we'll say, right? And so as they come back through town, the police from the city are chasing the two robbers. And as they go back through village A is like, hey, the cops are coming through town. That ain't gonna fly around here. And so the village A starts attacking the cops because they know the guys from village B and they're like, we don't care if you robbed a liquor store. We care that these cops are going to come through our town. And so we're not having that, see? And
so we can deal with the robbers. We just can't deal with the police. We can, because we know where they live. We can go avenge ourselves on the robbers if we need to.
Right? Yeah, and they don't even care about the robbers at all. It's not a problem. And so they whack these cops. And so the city's like, hey, you can't come killing our robbers. And this whole thing breaks into chaos because these two cats went and robbed this liquor store. And so like we are trying to understand like these situations, but we don't understand the dynamics between what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so when we see a crime, we think, well, you have to stop this crime. No, you don't. No, you don't. You have to leave that alone. That doesn't belong to you. And so when we think we need to be involved in something, a lot of times you have to say, is this our business? And then when the Afghans go, not your business, don't worry about that. Well, how can we help for this? And they're like, you want to stand by the side, bring some water, and mostly shut up and get out of the way? You go, okay, yeah. Or should we just not show up at all? Like, maybe best just don't show up at all. All right.
Nice.
And so we just don't. Yeah. And that's a win, by the way. We don't like it, but that's a win.
Because there's like nobody got killed that week, basically.
Yeah, we let him handle it. So this is a great story. If you give me a second, I'll tell you this. So I took this approach, and this governor that I got out of his way. I'm like, hey, if we leave this guy alone, he's telling me he wants to govern. Let's see how it goes. And the army was great. They're like, yeah, let's try this approach. So he's governing. He's like, Pete, I want you to stay away for about 5 days. I'll call you when I'm ready for you. So and this is all built up. This wasn't right away. This is a lot of work to get us all out of his way and let him do his thing. And so he's doing it, and he calls me. He's like, all right, we're gonna have a big meeting. I don't want you to do anything. And you and your interpreter can sit on the back wall and just shut up. And at the end, we'll tell you what happens. And I'm like, can I bring a reporter? He won't say anything. He'll just be there to kind of like take pictures. And so he's like, that's perfect. You can do that. Nothing else. And so we sit there. I have no idea, Allison, no idea what's going on. I just see these guys talking. I can't tell anything. I don't know the language good enough. I can't even follow because I don't know any of these. I know certain words, but I don't know any of these words. And then all of a sudden, they all sit back, and I'm like, oh, it's over. And I'm looking at my interpreter, and he's like, it is over. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, it is
It is
all
over.
resolved. Yeah, and I'm like, what's resolved? He's like, a very big thing. It's a very good day. It's all resolved. And I'm like,
They're
all
going
right.
to
And
tell
so,
you what happened.
yeah, a 54-year land dispute, like the McCoys and the what do we call it? What's that land dispute called?
Oh, the
The Hatfield
Hatfields and
McCoys.
McCoys, right?
That kind of dispute. The Taliban couldn't solve it, but this cat, he solved this governor. He solved it. And he's like, this is how I did it. And he sat down and he explained the whole thing. I learned so much from this, but it happened right in front of my eyes. And I had no idea what was going on. But I learned because he's like, I stayed out of the way. I let him govern. And then people kept talking about it. It became a nationwide story within the Afghan network, but we didn't know about it. And so I got our news to report it. We didn't care two bits about it because it wasn't our news. But in the tribal network, it made it all the way around the entire country. And so you had this big thing, but it was a win invisible to us. And if we didn't allow him to do it, he wouldn't have been able to do it. So here's this massive win that was a tribal dispute that was decades old, had hundreds of murders involved in it,
Oh,
and now was over because we mostly just stood back and shut up. And then as they explained it, I got to write report after report after report about all these things that happened. And at the core, this whole thing was religion, by the way. And
ah,
in America, we would be like, what do you mean religion and the state were working together to solve this thing?
mhm.
But that doesn't make sense to us, right? That's Chickenfoot. We're like, Chickenfoot? No, Chickenfoot can't solve this, but Chickenfoot did solve
And but that's the thing is if you hadn't been there, no one knew, and you didn't write the reports, then this thing, which was a good thing and solved huge problems, they wouldn't have known. And they'd have
it.
been
Right,
trying to operate militarily and on a humanitarian basis with absolutely no idea that, like, the
right.
feud that was going wasn't happening anymore and why. I mean, how insanely dangerous then would that be?
Right, right, right. And you know, it's important to note too, like we were trying to delegitimize the Taliban in that area, and here was this thing that they weren't able to solve at all, right? And so the people had gotten together behind their governor and they had solved this problem. It was an enormous win and really was an opportunity to get the Taliban's attention. It did. The Taliban showed up immediately after that
Yikes.
and they're like, "What's going on here?" And shortly after that, because we had had so much ability to get the governor to like really start to engage and bring the population towards him, and started solving a bunch of little, and these are little problems like, hey, the road is rutty. This is a
You
dirt
found
road.
someone they liked.
Yep, yep. And he was prepared to lead them. And they were letting him, they were bringing problems to him instead of to us. Now, some of this was performative, right? But you got to prime the pump. And so we would go into town and I would say things like, what's the smallest problem you have around here? Is the government working? And they're like, yeah. And his name was Zarif. Zarif's a pretty good guy. And that's new because they didn't used to say that. And I'm like, what has Zarif done? And they're like, you know what he solved that dispute, or he threw a party. I'm like, what else could he do? And they're like, you know what,
Or he got
that
water.
road,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
He called
If he
Dave and
could,
got the damn water.
right? And so you ask, and then they'll say something like, you know what, we could use those parachutes that the Americans have. And I'm like, well, how do you get those parachutes? Well, we'd have to go to Zarif and he'd have to talk to the Americans. It used to be, we'll go to the Americans and get those from them. But now they're going to Zarif, the governor, as a resource. I mean, these are small, small things, but you're starting to see the government be a resource for the people, and so that's what you're looking for. Like, and that's how you build belief in the government. But it's one small place in a giant country, and you need to have 1,000 of these events happen and continue to build. And ultimately, once you leave, you have to build it all over again.
And it must be frustrating. This is slow going because you go, wow, there's so many problems that these people are having. This is a mess. This is a mess. And this system, okay, it's their system, but it's not working. But you literally have to go, it's like town by town. It's like, well, if we fix this thing, then they'll be
Mhm.
speaking to each other and then we can get to the next thing. And then maybe we can stop killing people like that. But it's
Yeah.
got to be frustratingly slow.
Oh, it is. And then at some point, the government has to actually get to fledgling, not even working, right? And so shortly after that, so there's a couple things that happened in that area. Shortly after that, the Taliban called a meeting with Zarif and said, "Bring those Americans over. We want to see them." Me and my buddy Rich. And so, and I don't know about this. And so Zarif's like, "Pete, I want you and Rich to come and meet me over at, we'll say, Bob's house. And so we go over to, his name's not Bob, he's an Afghan farmer. And it's just down the road. It's no big deal, but we are nowhere near the American camp. We're about 150 yards away. And so we go to this meeting. There's a bunch of farmers in there, and we're just looking around. And we recognize some of the names, but not all of them. But that's fine. That's normal. And then at the end, the next day, Zarif calls us into his office. He's like, "Hey, I wanted to let you know that meeting we went to was called by the Taliban, and I had to bring you guys to that meeting." And we're like, "Oh, wow. What does that mean?" He's like, "Well, they wanted to know who you were. They had heard about you, and they liked you, and they decided to let you guys keep working because you are respectful, and they think you're scholars, and they appreciate you." So even though we're working in this, spy capacity, we're also working culturally in a way that was respectful, and so we were allowed to work.
And
Um,
allowed to not die.
yeah, right. Allowed
There's
to not
that.
die.
They
Yeah,
could stop
this
you.
is
They could say, we
yeah.
don't like you, and now we're going to kill you
This
because
goes
that's
back 20 minutes, right? I have to ingratiate myself, and I'm not being Johnny Goodtime here. I'm being a respectful, guy with a beard. But yeah, I mean that all goes into that. And then the other thing that happened in that area was we were trying to get the government to stand up for its people, and we couldn't do it. In part because the Americans got in the way. There was one bit of money that was going to come back down through the government pipeline, and an American went in and blocked it and said those guys are tied to the Taliban. And I went and I talked to that guy, and I'm like, "Man, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, those guys are tied to the Taliban." And I'm like,
yeah.
"But this is where the Taliban was invented."
Every
Like
year, oh, back
literally.
to the Taliban. How do we get, Richard?
Yeah, like how is the government going to work if you don't let it work? And why did you get in the way? I don't care if I'm out there in Taliban country. You're not. You're sitting here enough. And I was so mad at this guy because right when there was another point of failure too. I'll tell you about that in a second. But if you are going to get in the way and you don't know anything other than they're tied to the Taliban, and I have to explain this. Where we were sitting was 1 mile, 2 miles tops from a guy named Mullah Omar. If you look up Mullah Omar, there's a Wikipedia article. This guy is a Raiders of the Lost Ark level character, real person who like went in and put on the robe of Muhammad, and he's like had
Oh,
one
dear.
eye, and we chased this guy forever. He was like Osama bin Laden, but he was the Afghan version of it. And so this guy lived right there at that time. We could never find him. They never would tell us where that guy was, right? So he was a mile from that place where I was standing. And so we, for all of our power and all of our intel and all of my skills as a spy, no idea that guy's there. So we are in the heart of Taliban country for sure. But this guy steps in the way and he stops the government from functioning. And I'm like, it's so hard to make the government work. Why did an American stop it, right? So these are the things that you have to understand. There's one other real quick story. We're trying to get the Afghan farmers to stop growing poppy. Now we do things like fly helicopters in and barbecue the fields, all these things. Zarif says, "Let me handle it. I know how to do it. I'm going to get all these farmers to come in. I'm going to tell them it's against Islam to do it. They're all going to thumb off and they're going to sign a paper and say, I promise as a good Islamic man not to grow it. And there's a government program that's going to pay you to not do it. And I'm going to use my
That sounds like
ability
a
as a
twofer
governor."
because it's a
Right.
drug. It's an addictive drug. Okay, that would be about. And yeah, I mean, they're not even supposed to be drinking and smoking. So why would that be
Yeah.
okay? And
Right.
then they're going to pay you to not grow them. Sounds good to
Right.
me. So okay.
And the Taliban is going to pay them to grow it. So he's going to undermine the Taliban. He's going to use his capacity as a former Mujahideen leader, a governor, and a holy man, because he's also an imam. He's going to use all his things, and he's going to get these guys to do. Remember, he's got all this power, all this energy, all blended into everything. He's had wins like crazy, and the government failed, didn't pay him. And all the farmers are
Oh
like, well, it's
no.
good because we all hedged our bet and grew the poppy anyhow. And so you have like this exactly that's the piece that you're making. That's it. And you're just like, oh my God, like if we just and look, maybe it all would have crashed. But when the government doesn't do its part, you're like, why are we here? Like, why are we doing
That
this?
these stories when people say talk about military incompetence, it's just sort of this like blinders on mindset. And you've talked about they'll make mistakes and you'll go back and explain. They're like, no, that's how we do. It's just that's the way we've always done it. And it's like, no, it's not going to work. And then you have all the different countries. So maybe they learn exactly how it works in the Middle East, and then you go somewhere else, and that doesn't work over there because it's a different system. I mean, some of the stuff you're talking about sounds horribly extreme because, like I said, these are countries where you go, well, the conditions aren't good, and I don't like that system. But it almost sounds like in a horrible domestic violence situation.
Mm,
When people go to a
yeah.
friend who's being battered and is a domestic violence marriage or relationship, and it's like, well, we'll leave. Well, yeah, that would make sense. And if they can, yeah, that's great. Get them in the car,
Mm,
get them out. But as we know, the highest incidence of getting murdered by your partner is right when they try to leave. So
yeah.
what do? They say, well, okay, yeah, but if I leave, he will kill me. I know he'll kill the pets and he'll kill the children, he'll kill everybody in the house. And we see on the news, they go to kill the whole family. So how do you get out of there? So sometimes it's a whole process. It's like, okay, well, how does it work? What is it that, where does he go? What does he do? What do you do when this happens? How have you been living like this for the last few years? So how in that system do we get your ass out of here and alive in one piece? How do we make this stop? But as we've seen, the obvious of just telling someone, well, just grab your stuff and go, does not work, and they wind up dead. And that's why you see people going back, and you go, but it's they're beating them, it's domestic, but we know it's bad, we know it is a bad system. But it becomes, as social workers and cops and everyone who deals with this knows, you have to navigate this whole horrendous existing system in order to get the person out and save the life.
I mean, it's you've done this work. You get it, and this is where, like, yes, I'm a spy, but part of what I do is this stuff. I'm a part news reporter, I'm part social worker, and so when I'm looking at these people, I have to build trust, and it can't be about me, it can't be about my mission, it can't be about my ego, and I look at these people and I say, these are battered kids. These are abused wives, and they are not going to trust me. And if the words I say, because in my field, you can be like, hi, my name's Drake. I'm from Colorado. And I can lie, right? Because I'm supposed to. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Sorry, I don't want to swear. That's baloney. And so, um, and if I do that and I don't believe it, they are going to know. And so I'm like, I'm Pete. I'm from California. I'm here to help. And I don't have much to give you, but what I can give you is a voice. I can communicate with the commander. If I have to, I'll bring the commander out here to show you, but I'm only going to do that when it makes a difference, and I tell them what I can do, and I do communicate back. And I tell the commander the same thing. I don't have much, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I think is going on. I'm going to be honest. Right. And so
And
I
yet you
build
can't
trust with
promise
them.
the moon. You can't promise the moon, because it's
You
like
can't.
going into a battering situation, telling the abused person, oh yeah, I
Hmm.
can fix this. Well, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And like, so when they say, I used to go out every night with my interpreter. I'm great with interpreters because I tell them, don't promise anything, don't offer anything. And so we would go out and I'd say, I want to know the smallest problem that we might be able to solve today. Like, what can you and I go do? Are we going to go pick up a tire and fix it? We can do that, right? But look for small things. And so they would say things, this is in Iraq, and they would say like, Maku Mai, Maku Karabat. I'm like, I know what that, look, and I would go, Maku Ma, Maku Karabat. I would mock them and my interpreter would go, Pete, understate. We hear that every night. Bad electricity, bad water. We get it. Don't tell us about that. We can't fix that. And so we would make a point, and it would be, and like, you get this. This is a performance. Now I'm an actor. I'm making a point of mocking what they're saying because, of course, that's bad. You all say that. What can we really solve? And they'll go, all right, that concrete wall over there. Can you move that? And I'm like, I can move any concrete wall. I'll get a commander right here tomorrow to move you tell me any concrete wall you want moved. Tell me why. I'll get it moved. And then, but you have to go to your Iraqi leader to do it. And so now we're talking. Now we're trading. And that kind of thing that worked all the time. And so all of these exchanges were performances, but I had to build trust. And once I moved that concrete wall, I'm like, then I can go back. I told you I'd move that concrete wall. We got it moved the next day, didn't we?
It's
All right, now what's next? Who can we
like
talk to?
principles of like social work, practically principles of psychological, of like social work, and of helping people in situations. Like we were talking before the show about, when I was working in AIDS education, AIDS Project Los Angeles Safer Sex Workshop, meeting people where they were. You
Yeah.
couldn't just walk into a community that you'd never spoken to, a group of people, and just go, well, we have these condoms and have a good day.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's you had to talk to people. People would sometimes send different types of speakers to different areas, to different
Oh,
places, venues to speak, because they would be more accepted, they would listen to them sooner. And there was all endless training, I mean, weeks and weeks
yeah.
of training for the AIDS hotline and for the Speakers Bureau, because you just couldn't come in and go, well, you had to meet people where they were and go, well, what
Yeah.
are you doing? What is your
Yeah.
life, and what relationship are you in with life? Well, here's how in that setup, you could in fact actually prevent the spread of HIV
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a way I can do it. Yes, there is. And that
Yeah.
worked. because we
Uh-huh.
were actually talking to people. But the idea that the like principles of social work are being used in a
Yeah.
military intelligence
Yeah,
scenario
and
is like, wait, what? But duh.
yeah. And you have to understand, like, I'm saying you know this, but you have to understand in general, like, okay, so I had in my life, a gay man. There's no judgment in this. I had a gay man in my life, in my like my greater family life, who was flat out addicted to going to a gym, putting an ad out on a social media site and saying, "I will be there all day." And then we would say, "Hey, Uncle so and so, you cannot do that." And he'd go, I
Yes,
can.
I can, and I'm going to.
And there was no stopping. We didn't have the skills to do it. And it was like, it's so dangerous. You have to, and this person lives in a very gay area where it is absolutely dangerous. And we were too close to him. We did not have the skills to do it. And he did not want to hear it. And there was nobody who had the social working kind of, and I was desperate to try to figure that out. I quit talking to him about it because I had no ability with all of my skills. I did not have that pocket of skills to
Right,
do it.
because
Right.
you were trying to do the normal thing. Okay, well, stop going to the
Yeah.
gym and stop doing that. No, no, this
Yeah.
is what we do is we
Yeah.
go to the gym, we do the so that's the thing is,
Uh-huh.
how do you protect
Yeah. And I
yourself
know better,
while
right?
going
And
to
I
the gym
could
and doing
not
that?
solve it. Yeah, right. Because we all get so desperate to help that we lose the ability to step back and go, okay, I know these principles. How do I apply them? And now we're asking someone who is a combat warrior to have the skill to be a social worker, and at some point we're being unfair to that person. And there's a concept I believe in called ethical saturation, where you cannot send someone into a place and give them an ethical fan of things. You have to get right all the time because you lose the ethical, you saturate them ethically, where yes, it is terrible that a man and a boy are in a sexual relationship because that's culturally normal there. And you say, hey, that's not appropriate. You must stop them from doing that. Well, now you have an ethical problem because that army person is not trained in how to do that. And now you might create a violent situation where you're doing more harm than good than just ignoring it. And that doesn't
And
sound
you're gonna
ethically
get the kid
appropriate.
killed.
Yourself, that kid, that man, you might get 50 people killed, right? And so you're like, I have to ignore that because I am not trained to deal with that. That doesn't make sense in California. That doesn't make sense in Tennessee, but it makes sense when you're going on a combat patrol and they put IEDs on the road and you don't have time or resources or training to deal with it. But that's what ethical saturation is. You know, when you say, hey, we're never going to go into a mosque or engage religion in any way, but you're in a religious society. At the time, the name Islam was in the title of the Afghan government. And so, like, you have to be prepared to deal with religion.
Well, if a place where, and that's also communities in this country that are very engaged with, say, their local church,
Sure.
anything you're doing in that community, where do they meet? Where do the people meet? Where do they talk
Right.
to each other about serious issues, about AIDS, what have you? At the church. Who do they
Yeah.
take advice
Right.
from? Their pastor.
Yeah.
So if you don't engage the pastor in the church community, then you're not talking to that group of people. So the same thing. If all the business is conducted at the mosque, then I guess you're going to the mosque.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether you
No,
get
absolutely. Yeah. And this is the Ground Truth
that's just
Center. This is what we do.
really hard.
Right.
Now,
And
this organization you formed
the Ground
is
Truth Center,
this
yeah.
for civilians? Is this for the military? This
It's
ground truth.
it's Yeah, I mean, it really ultimately the idea is just to say practitioners, social workers, would be practitioners, people that know how to say, hey, if the goal here is to do less harm and we're going the policy is homelessness or whatever it is, let's get the practitioners out there so that when you say we are going to do X, the practitioners can go, ooh, hold on. Uh, how are you going to train people to do that? Like when you see I don't know, look, you go into where we live. Like if you go into Santa Monica and you walk down the street, you see the future and you see human horrors at the same block, and you see robot cars but no one in them, and then you see people on the street that are unrecoverable in terms of like being like you could want, but reality is no. And so, how do you reconcile that? And a policy is just not going to fix that. So how do you manage that, right? And so you take social workers and you go, This is the reality is you need, and then you have the ground people that know what it means to go out and deal with, I don't know, 40 people, 10 people, what it is. And then how do you get them from where they begin to where they end up? And you know that some number of them will die, some number will be always in some level of heavy care. And then whatever that is, and then you just try to say, that is where we are, and that is what it takes to get down the road. A lot of
Right, because with
this is just Pete
homelessness,
talking.
there's multiple reasons, and that's the thing.
Right.
There are people who are severely drug addicted, severely alcohol, and there are people who are severely mentally ill. They suffer from
Yeah.
schizophrenia, untreated.
Oh
They
my gosh.
there's the
Right.
people who go out and say, "Hey, we can get you an apartment," and you've got the people who say, "Great, fabulous, where is the apartment?" And then you have people say, "What is an apartment?" And
Yeah.
these people
Yeah.
are very, very ill. They need
Yes.
medical
Right.
assistance.
Right.
It's
Right.
not just like, well, if we get them in the car and we take them to the place. No, they don't know where they
Yeah.
are. So you have these
Right.
people, and then you have these people,
Right.
and you have all of these different things all happening at the
Yeah.
same time in one block.
And it's so tough. And I pick on the homelessness thing because here in California we struggle with it. But a lot of these programs are temporary. It's like 6 months. Hey, we won, and you're like, did you?
That's a big one. Then you leave.
Yeah.
What happens? They go in. Absolutely, they'll go in. They'll do a sweep, and then maybe they'll
Hmm.
even help the people they swept. They won't just kick them off. They'll say, "Okay, we're going to help you out. We've got a place for you to stay.
Yeah.
We have this," and then they leave. And 6 months
Yeah.
later, who's back on the street?
Back. Back. Right. Right. And so you know, like it's a housing problem. Okay.
This
Right.
part over here, maybe, and then there's
Yeah. And so like using this kind of context, like that's what we're trying to solve is like when we have policy, when we write legislation, let's make sure that we're talking to, we always often talk about stakeholders, right? But we often forget like what the shape of the tent is. Like what's what I'm saying? Like, okay, do you have the stakeholders here? And do you have the actual people that pound the stakes in? Because that'd be you and me, the people that go out and like, I don't think that you know what tent you're building because I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Yeah, well, sure, we need more housing, but that person's schizophrenic. I can't fix that. I can't fix that, you know? So that's what the Ground Two Center is. Like we're trying to take the ambassadors, the legislators, the policy, the theoretic people, and connect them to the people who go out and actually go on the ground and do the hard work that of realizing that policy, that strategy.
and how long have you been doing that?
Well, we're just getting it off the ground now. Every time I publish the website, I'm like, I got to take it down and fix it. And so, it's just constantly evolving because I didn't realize until we were talking, like there really is the social policy piece of it, and I don't want to leave social workers out because we do lose sight of that. Look, and I'll pick on California. It is hard to run this state. We have big problems.
Big
We
place.
want Yeah, it's complex and we want to lead the world in how to be compassionate and get things right. And that means we take on really hard human problems, but there's a lot of inhumanity in our humanity. And that's me being nice. I want to take on problems. I want to show everybody else how to get this right. We get it wrong a lot.
It's so indeed your services of this thing, this kind of education you're doing, you're talking about, governmental agencies so that they make better policy, they're better educated, and as well as the military,
Yeah.
but also civilian groups, you would say, for nonprofits that are going
Yeah.
out to help the homeless, help people who are ill,
Yeah.
people in battering
Yeah.
situations, that your
Yeah.
nonprofit may have expertise even in those situations.
Yeah. Like how do you build a better you? How do you build a better me? How do I get to be in a faster licensing thing like, hey, this person knows how to go into the field and deal with schizophrenia, or hey, you're going to write a policy thing. Do you have any ground truth experts here who understand that stuff? Oh, no, I hadn't even thought about that. Oh, great. I mean, no one's a bad person. Everybody wants to do the right thing. So how do you create that? And what we talk about, like with my friends who are ambassadors, like we have to have principled behavior. We have to first make sure that we're not getting people killed by ignoring people who are at the ground level, who have the most knowledge about this problem. We're trying to solve the freshwater problem. Someone raised their hand. What about the dirty water problem? Oh, we hadn't even thought about that. Do we need to slow down? Let's
What
slow down.
happens when you get water? You mentioned that's like, okay, so we got everybody fresh water in this area, but now what happens to the wastewater? They have fresh running water, but then the water that they didn't drink, where does that go?
Hmm. Yeah, right. Where does it go? Well, we're not going to worry about that right now.
Oops.
Okay. All right. Here comes the cholera. Here comes all the waterborne diseases, and That's great, and you've made things worse. You made things more lethal, you know?
So is this
Yeah,
the road to hell is paved with good intentions is
right.
basically it's
Yeah.
that. It's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, like, we always say, like, does it brief well? Probably shouldn't do it. Like, if it looks beautiful on a slide, you need someone from our world to go, "Well, raise your hand." So I was in this briefing, and in the military, that there's levels of things. There's like Pete, there's squad, there's platoon, all the way until there's only generals in the room. And I happen to be in one of these rooms where it's all generals and people that get paid a lot of money. And they're talking about, oh, we're going to build this thing to our legacy. We're going to leave it here in Iraq, and it's going to be called the Victory Tower. We're trying to decide, like, are we going to do this or not? We got to give the boss, a general with many stars, we got to give him a recommendation. And I love to do this. Alison, I love this. I raise my hand because I'm a wise ass, and I go,
oh
"Hey,
yeah.
is this working group? Like, are we allowed to be candid, or are we just agreeing with everything?" Because it's a loaded question. They're like, "No, no, no." And I am not in this unit. I'm just a guest.
Oh
And they're
no.
like, "No, no, no. You could be candid. What do you have to say?" And I'm like, "You're talking about the Victory Tower and trying to decide on the recommendation. You got to say all that stuff up front. Has I don't know. Has anyone asked the Iraqi governor?" And like, "No. Why don't we ask him?" I'm like, red man again. Why wouldn't you ask him? He's the governor. He's the governor. You're acting the ambassador and the general, but not the actual governor. And they're like, "Well, uh, the gov." And then I just shut up. But that's the ground truth guy, right? You just roll that hand grenade in the middle of the room, and you're like, there's an actual guy who's in charge of this area, you know. And we get so important. It's so much about us that we know we've built the tent, but that's not that dude is in charge.
Okay,
He's
even
the
if
long
you want
tent
to
pole.
do it and you said he doesn't want it and we still want to do it, don't you still then have to somehow go through him and engage
Yeah,
him
yeah,
to talk him into it or go over his
yeah.
head? You still have to deal with the people on the ground and find it.
I've said this so many times to the commander. I'm like, we're going to do whatever you want to do, but by exception, understand that, like, the governor is the boss, you know. And so, and I learned this from Zarif. And look, understand, I made this mistake 100 times before I got it right once. And Zarif said to me, "Pete, there's only room for one sword in the scabbard." I'm like, "Ooh, that's great." And I write that down.
It's a
So I go
lovely
to the,
one.
I go to the boss, and I'm like, "Hey man, he says there's only room for one sword in the scabbard. He'd like to know who the sword is." And he's like, "Well, Zarif is the sword." We both sat back, and all right. And then I went back to Zarif and I said, "You're the sword. Let's find out what your plan is." And we made out a whole plan. And he told me what his plan was. And I wrote it down. And I tried to figure out what basketball and chicken foot and corduroy all was.
Oh, this
And
whole
I did. And then, I mean, people still died. It was still dangerous. All the other things happened. We all left. Nothing happened. But that was the beginning of trying to show the Army, like, how this stuff, and the State Department and Department of Ag, how all this stuff works. This
it
is
sounds terrible.
a
I mean,
decade into it. Yeah.
is it possible by having greater intelligence and going into these things and actually learning what's happening on the ground? Is it possible at some point to lessen or avoid actual war and bloodshed? I mean, that's where our goal is. We're always saying we'd like to not have 17 wars going at the same time all over the world. It would be nice if people weren't bombing each other into the Stone Age all day long.
Yeah.
Is it humanly possible through these kind of communications to lower the number of wars a little?
I would love that, because I'll tell you right now what's going to happen was, when we stop fighting in Ukraine, we're going to go to Ukraine and teach Ukrainian farmers how to farm. I mean, if there is more fertile land than the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, it's in Ukraine.
Really?
And we taught Ukrainian farmers how to farm. Iraqi farmers how to farm. I watched us do it. We congratulated ourselves. We patted ourselves on the back about how we were. And I would talk to these farmers, and I'd be like, "What do you actually need? What do you actually need to grow, like, to do great?" And they would tell me, and I would write the reports. And everybody in the State Department would ignore it and tell me I was crazy. And I'm like, "I'm not crazy. If I'm crazy, then the Iraqi farmers are crazy,
I just
and that's
brought you back.
fine." Yeah, because it's not Pete's opinion here. I'm telling you what the farmers are saying. And so, we're going to do the same thing. And I just, like, I'm tired of doing that. I'm tired of telling Afghan farmers how to farm their land. I went and I talked to this Army major who was an actual farmer, and he was on what's called an agricultural team. And he's like, "We're here to help these farmers, farm better." And I'm like, so what's the market? These guys were pomegranate farmers. What's the market chain for these pomegranates from here to wherever they go? They're like, I don't know. And I
Oh,
said, well, why are you fucking with it?
wouldn't you need to know that? That would be, you'd have to know that.
Did not care. And he said, I don't care about that, Pete. And I'm like, well, you should, and so Pete does. Pete goes and finds it out. And I go and I talk to them because they had all these assumptions that these guys didn't know how to do their job. And these are generational farms. And so I'm like, and I didn't look, I'm good at my job. I went and I talked to all these farmers. They're like, oh man, you know what? It's really interesting how we farm. And they told me everything. And I went to this farmer, that farmer, and they all told me. And they told me about the guy, the brokers that come. They told me the whole story, and I wrote it all up, gave it a report, and they're like, because we have a conception, and we're like, they need a co-op. We get like these very, I'll be unfair to the lefty people. We get these lefty hippy dippy things like they need a co-op. This is how they're going to survive. And I'm like, they already have a co-op. They already do that. They
are a
already
co-op.
share. Yeah, they are a co-op. And they have a way of doing it. They don't need us they know. Here's what they need. They need you to shut up. That's the first thing. And if you want to help them, listen to what they have to say. Like they have to bring their crop into town. They have a guy they already deal with. There's already a broker. He pays a certain price. If you want to help them make more money, maybe figure out the brokers and deal with those guys. I don't know. But
Or help
I can
them
tell you
get
that
safely into town to the broker without getting shot or
yeah, how
something
about that? Yeah,
very
yeah,
badly.
yeah, yeah. I saw a guy out. It's 100% true. I saw a guy bringing goats to market. He had a Toyota minivan, like a kind from like 20 years ago, and he had strapped, like ratchet strap, goats to the top of his van,
Ow.
and they were alive. They were screaming, and then
Yeah.
inside his van was filled to as much as he could with pomegranates. That's how he took his crops to market.
Just in the car.
Yeah, and so if he needs help, I would ask that guy, "Do you need help?
You need
I mean,
like a bigger car. Do you need a truck?
yeah,
You need a truck.
do you need
Maybe
something
you need
else?"
a truck.
And maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's like, a bigger truck would get me killed, because what they don't need is Taliban attention. And so maybe that's that. And so you ask him, like, how in the world can we help you? And he would probably say, I just need to be able to get to work safe.
Maybe he
If
had
you
a
can
truck
just,
and he switched to the car. But we
it
wouldn't
could easily
know.
be, could easily be. That road was so rough, that van was probably the thing that was alive. Like maybe just getting him services down at Ricky's so he could get his car lubed up and keep it on the road is probably the thing that would be most valuable, because that road broke our cars. Like you could not drive out there. It was very rough. Anyhow, so the point is,
like you go in and fix, like, what do they need? Maybe they need the road fixed.
yeah, right. Yeah, I don't either. Right. And it's always simple things, but we always come in with these grand things like we're gonna build them a pomegranate squishing factory. Like they don't need that. They don't need that. They don't want that. Or you have the palm company. This is 100% true. The palm, the Wonder Company, and I love these guys. They're like, we want a corner of the market on the pomegranate thing, and it almost destroyed the Afghan farm. I don't want to get too much into this story, but it was going to be a big problem. But the Wonder Company thought that they could do this, and they did in some ways.
It seemed like a good idea. Distribution of pomegranate juice to the whole world. All this, we all like it. We all drink it. Get more people drink pomegranate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they have lobbying power because they have a lot of money, and I think there's even some veteran ownership, in there. And it's like, yeah, this briefs well, but boy, oh boy, did that get really dangerous really fast. It was. This is one of those great ideas, and it didn't play out well on the ground. Very dangerous to do these kind of things.
And you also mentioned in your interacting with different groups that one of your expertise is travel. So you're not like in bombed out areas. Where you give travel advice as well?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I used to do a lot of advice on like professional, like, how do you stay alive, like, in different cultures, that kind of thing. Is that what you're referring to?
Right, because they're seeing people travel, they go all over, and I'm seeing people travel, just people, leisure travelers, work travelers, not in military capacity, who go to other countries, but they go not knowing anything before they get there, and chaos ensues.
Yeah. I think the best advice in these cases is, look, grab the book and read the book if you want to and everything. I think the best thing is just don't know it all, and if you meet someone from that country, ask and just be curious, because that curiosity, I think, is powerful. So like, one of the things, like the tricks I do, and it's not a trick, it's just a technique I've learned, is like in Arab culture, you don't eat with your left hand. Um, and I'm ambidextrous, but I eat with my left hand primarily. And so I'll say, I am from America, and I normally eat with my left hand. And I know that that's kind of a thing that you guys don't do. What are your guys' thoughts? And they're like, yeah, we know you're from America. You can eat with your left hand. Not that big of a deal to us. And you're like, huh. And so like or they'll say, that's disgusting. If you do
Don't eat
that,
with your left hand here.
right. Yeah. And so they'll tell you, right? And so you'll say, you know what Christmas is like? We just had this holiday. What's Ramadan like? And they cannot help themselves but to tell you, oh my God, Ramadan is the best. This is a great Ramadan story. I was sitting in this colonel's office in Iraq, and it's Ramadan. And Americans are always like, you cannot consume anything, not even water. And I know this is not true, right? Because Americans say it, so it's dumb, because we don't think through culture at all. So I'm talking to this colonel, and I hadn't really broken through with him yet. I've only met him a couple of times, but I'm like, hey, we call colonels Muqaddam. That's like the Arabic way of saying, that's the Iraqi Arabic way of saying colonel. Muqaddam. Hey, Muqaddam. It's Ramadan, and I'm just always curious how all you guys do it. You guys always say, I'm not that religious, but it's Ramadan. So I don't know. What do you think? Like, if I drink water, how would you feel about that? And he's like, why would you drink water when I have perfectly good whiskey in my desk? And I'm like, you got whiskey in your desk? Like, you would drink whiskey right now during Ramadan? And he's like, do you want whiskey? And I'm like, yes, I do. And he's like, well, then come over here and let's drink whiskey together. We became buddies that day. And we had whiskey during Ramadan. Why? Because I was curious and I asked about culture. And so rather than be intimidated by it, and look, maybe you don't get offered whiskey, but a lot of times you do, because everybody wants to show you their culture. They want to show you their food. They want to show you the best things about where they're from.
See, and this is what I tell people. I go to France all the time, but that's what I tell people. Ask people, so what's the interesting thing in your town? I go to small towns. What's your interesting, most historical, fascinating thing? They were like, really? Oh, come with me. They do. Everybody wants to show you their stuff. You can have a great time and get the best tour in town. Ask. And it sounds hilarious that, like, well, how do you find it? How do you get through to the village? How do you get to the leaders of the village? How do you ingratiate yourself in another? Well, you ask.
Yeah. When the mayor of Darmstadt, I was in the army, the mayor of Darmstadt, I got selected because I did something good in the army. And they're like, you're going to go on a dinner with the mayor of Darmstadt. And so I sat down, and he was talking to me because I'm, the guest of honor and everything. And I'm just a kid. I'm just a knucklehead. And he's like, do you like schnapps? The answer to that question is always going to be yes. And so I said, of course I like schnapps. Sure. And he's like, my family is famous in Darmstadt for making schnapps. And so we're going to drink schnapps. I don't remember much after that moment, but I know that we went to his family's distillery and we drank so many schnapps, and that guy would not leave me alone. He would take me out probably once a quarter, and we would go have dinner together. And I made this friend. I don't remember the guy's name at all. It's been decades since I talked to this guy, but he loved it.
Do you have a book? Have you written a book? Do you have a book?
No, not yet.
Why do you not have a book? Okay, so are you writing a book? Are you going to write a book?
Yeah. I've got probably 70,000 words. I just got to smash them all into an order now and get
a good editor. But yes, you can get it all in there. Where do people find you if they want to read about you? You have a website. Where do we find you if we want to read?
Yeah, you can just Pete A. Turner is like on social media. You can find me there. I've written a bunch of stuff on a bunch of different places. I usually write things on. I used to have a website called Queso Paper. You can read stuff there, but the best thing is just to look up Pete A. Turner on X or on Instagram. That's the best way to find me. Pete at breakitdownshow.com. I've got my show. I'm not trying to plug my show, but
you're everywhere. Yeah.
I'm hard to find. You look it up, and I'm glad to answer questions or do whatever. But yeah, I'm hard to find. I like to run my mouth. I like to talk about things, share stories.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on my show. It's absolutely fascinating. And I mean, good. I'm sure the comment section is going to be like, what? Because it is shocking things. But, it's when in doubt, ask. It seems to be, it's so hard because we want to do things and we want to help other people. We want to go to these places. And it's like, but if you don't know, you're going down in flames. Yikes. Horrifying. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on my show. And thank you, everyone, for watching. This is the Alison Arngrim Show. And I'm Alison Arngrim.